Hi everyone, Pastor Stacy here. Thank you very much for being a teacher for students this year. I'm sitting here at my desk and it is September 2021. We have had quite a year with COVID, and thank you very much for being a teacher and working in a way that we find we believe will work for education this year. With COVID, we are continuing to modify. We are continuing to review, adjust as needed. And again, thank you for being one of those small group leaders this year. I have been reading through the book of Luke, and I came across this story that I believe very much relates to how so many people are handling events and gatherings this year and in this midst of COVID. And so I invite you.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I'd like to share a brief story from Luke's Gospel. So here from Luke's Gospel, chapter 5, beginning with verse 17. One day, while Jesus was teaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting nearby. They had come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was with him to heal. Just then some men came, carrying a paralyzed man on a bed. They were trying to bring him in and lay him before Jesus to be healed. But they were finding no way to bring him in because of the crowd. So they went up on the roof and let him down with his bed through the tiles into the middle of the crowd in front of Jesus. When Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven you." The word of our Lord. When I read that story, I thought of how the people have such a strong faith that they will do everything possible to ensure that their friend is healed, but so that people can see and understand and realize who Christ really is. And again, I relate that to teachers who are doing what they can to ensure that students learn about God, about God's love, that they learn about Jesus and the grace that we receive. Again, thank you for teaching this year, and I will now turn it over to a video that is been put out by Church Mutual, and they in the video they do refer to a campground, but many of the scenarios and the conversation very much relates to any type of a church event, activity, education within a classroom. So thank you again.
At a camp in the eastern U.S., 2 teenage staff members used a cabin where no adults were present and supervision was lax to bully, torment, and physically and sexually abuse 3 campers between the ages of 10 and 12. In the South, a 12-year-old girl was allowed to go to the restroom in the middle of the night, all by herself. An 18-year-old staff member with an undetected juvenile record and restraining order abducted and raped her. At a camp in the Midwest, an employee had a relationship with a former teen camper via text message. Many of the messages were inappropriate and sexually explicit.
The stories that you've just heard are heartbreaking for those of us who work hard each and every day to create a positive experience for campers. But unfortunately, they're true.
That's right. But the good news is there are steps you can take to help prevent these types of abuses from happening. I'm Chelsea, a camp staff member.
And I'm Mark, the camp director. Over the course of the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about the vital role you play in protecting the children and youth at your camp, and how you can prevent various types of abuse from happening. It's important because campers and their families are putting their trust in you to keep campers safe.
Campers and their families are also trusting you to be a positive role model. Children and youth will often mirror the behavior they see from those who are older than them. That means that everything you say and do can impact what they do, both at camp and when they return home. So keep it positive and never participate in any behavior that could cause physical or mental harm.
And finally, you're being trusted to keep a lookout for anything that might indicate that abuse is happening or has happened. In many states, camps are mandated reporters of child abuse. This means that if you suspect that abuse has happened, you must report it. It's the law.
It sounds like a lot, but we're going to break it down for you. We'll start with an overview of who the abusers are and the types of abuse that take place at camp. Then we'll share some ideas on how you can help prevent it. Let's get started.
The first step in preventing abuse is to understand who the abusers are, and they're not always who you think. Some abusers purposefully seek employment at camps as an opportunity to be close to children and youth. They are manipulative and use the system and their position as an authority figure to earn the trust of campers, and then ultimately betray that trust. An abuser could very well be one of your coworkers.
Not all staff-to-camper abuse is premeditated, though. Take, for example, a relationship that develops between a 20-year-old staff member and an underage camper. This is inappropriate in a camp setting and against the law, and it cannot be tolerated.
It's also possible that a staff member could harass another staff member. While this is technically defined as harassment, not abuse, it is possible that a camper might witness this behavior. They'll think it's okay and then model that behavior.
While we most often think of abuse happening between an adult and a minor, abuse among peers is common at camp. At camp, children are often overstimulated, and that can cause them to act out in different ways, abusive ways, such as bullying, violence, or sexual abuse.
And then there's abuse that happens before camp even begins. Teachers, parents, other family members, kids may come to camp and report abuse to you, and you need to know how to handle it appropriately. More on that coming up. But first, we want to make sure you understand the types of abuse you should be looking out for. Abuse is a complex subject because there are many types, including sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, as well as bullying, hazing, and inappropriate contact after camp.
The Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act has a technical definition of child sexual abuse that includes everything from molestation, rape, and prostitution to the enticement or coercion of children to engage in explicit conduct or simulate explicit conduct. This includes inappropriate touching in any way, shape, or form, exposure of oneself or asking another to expose him or herself, voyeurism, taking inappropriate photos, viewing or sharing pornography, or talking about inappropriate subjects in front of campers. Some of these are obvious things to avoid, others not so much. Something as simple as commenting on how a bathing suit looks on a camper, joking around, or mooning can be considered sexual abuse. It's critical that you think hard about your every action and your every word.
Another type of abuse is physical abuse, which the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act defines as any non-accidental physical injury to the child. This includes striking, kicking, burning, biting, encouraging fighting between campers, or any act or circumstance that threatens the child with harm or creates a substantial risk of harm. In some states, neglect is also considered physical abuse and refers to any situation in which food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or supervision is withheld. These are all very important things to consider when thinking about any discipline procedures at your camp.
While sexual and physical abuse are what most people first think of, ones love to hug. And it's okay to hug back, as long as you do it sideways. It's okay to hold hands with campers, as long as they are under 5 years old. Regardless of age, only touch campers on the arm, shoulders, and upper back. Another guideline is to never touch a camper somewhere that would be covered by a swimsuit. If first aid is required in an area normally covered by a swimsuit, or anywhere near the upper thigh, it should be provided in the company of another adult staff member. In terms of appropriate and inappropriate language, it's really quite simple. Never, ever use or allow the use of language that is foul, derogatory, sexual, or hurtful in everything you do, how you respond, and how you act as a leader. Everything will be modeled by campers. Appropriate behavior begins with you, so be sure to set a good example.
Besides screening and training, proper supervision procedures are a good way to help prevent abuse. Whether it's during structured activities or free time, you must adhere to strict supervision protocol. Keep campers within eyesight at all times. When eyesight is inappropriate, like during shower time, make sure you are within earshot. Always practice the rule of 2. That means you should always have 2 adults anywhere that children are present. Under no circumstance should you ever be alone with a child or group of children. Everything you do with campers should be done in the presence of others. We've talked a lot about what you should and shouldn't do to help keep campers protected, and it's a lot to get your head around. That's why you might consider drafting a written code of conduct that will be reviewed and signed by everyone who works at your camp. It lets everyone know what your expectations are, and is an excellent way to being a key way we communicate with each other. It's also recommended that camps have a social and digital media code of conduct in place. Again, having this be a written agreement that is signed by staff leaves everyone with a common understanding. Include rules such as the following. Camp staff should not have any one-on-one private contact with campers through any electronic communication vehicles, including, but not limited to, email, text messages, instant messaging, or Facebook. Any electronic communication between camp staff and campers must take place in a public environment, such as the camp's public Facebook page. Be sure to remove and avoid posting anything that doesn't align with the camp's image, including inappropriate photos, language, or activities. If there is ever a case when one-to-one communications with a camper is necessary, an additional camp staff member should be copied in the correspondence. Finally, suggest that parents monitor social media and pay attention to who their children are talking to in order to help mitigate abuse that happens after camp.
I'm Mike Ravin, President and CEO of Church Mutual Insurance Company. As you develop activities and safety protocol at your camp, I urge you to pay attention to the subject of abuse. The reality is, camp is a place where children and their parents are putting their implicit trust in people they don't know, and that creates the perfect atmosphere for abuse to take place. We hope you'll take our recommendations to heart as a way to help protect children and youth, as well as the reputation and longevity of your camp. Thank you for your time and attention, and for your commitment to creating a safe and nurturing camp environment.
The final letter in Alice, the E, is for evacuation. That's the preferred response. That's what we want you to do. Get out. Get out with whatever you have. Leave. Remove yourself as a potential target. Remember, I told you earlier, it comes down to two basic principles. Remove yourself from the dangerous location or render that location no longer dangerous. Get out. Get out the best way you can, the best way you know how. Get out of that area. And then stay out. You got to trust that other people are making good decisions. Can't get out and go back, oh, well, what about, you got to trust that that person made a good decision for them or the people that they're with. Or multiple decisions were made. That comes through training, right? That everybody knows that they're empowered to do something. You may have to determine, once you leave, where are you going? As a church, as a school, as a nursery, as a daycare, where are we going? If we are responsible for other people, we're responsible for juveniles, how are we getting them back to their loved ones? What does that process look like? Where are they going to so that we can get them back to their loved ones? It's a lot easier dealing with adults, right? Because they can fend for themselves. But what about your schools, your nursery, your child care wing? Those individuals that you have to get back to parents. Do you have predetermined rally points, predetermined accountability locations? How are we getting those? How are we identifying who belongs back to who? What's your process? Do you have a process? If you don't, you better start thinking about one. You better start sitting down at the conference table and having some real conversations. You know, hold that question for the end and we'll come back to that at the Q&A session. Right? But the best response is to not be there. You know, I would love to see the face of an active killer who gets to a room that's completely empty. And some of you agree with me. Right? But we want the best initial response, preferred response is to get out. If you can't, then counter, lockdown, whatever else works best.